Do you ever lie awake in the dark, listening to noises coming from under the bed? You're so desperately wanting to look, to see, but too afraid. Under the Bed by John Campbell. Read by Osquer and Anderko.
The old red-bricked Victorian vicarage had stood empty for some 3 years or more when my friend Bob bought it at a vastly reduced price. The scars wrought by neglect, nature, and the accompanying vandalism inflicted by idle village youths were still evident in places, but not quite as marked as they had been when I first visited in the spring. It was now approaching Christmas, and he had clearly worked tirelessly to restore its fortunes during the intervening months. I said as much with genuine enthusiasm as he gave me the guided tour, for I knew he had accomplished the transformation single-handed due to his limited budget. He acknowledged my words with the usual slight reddening of face and gentle smile, which had been his involuntary reaction to praise since we were small children. "It's been a learning curve, particularly the internal repairs to the plaster," he admitted. "My first attempts were so poor I had to redo most of my initial efforts to make the walls look even half decent." Bob was not naturally gifted when it came to practical tasks. Later, as we completed our second game of chess, he returned to the sleeping arrangements. "Are you sure you don't mind sleeping on the bottom bunk?" he asked. "Not at all. It will be fine just as long as you don't step on me if you need to get up in the middle of the night." He gave a rueful grin at my good-humored reference to his awakening me in the early hours of the morning when we were teenagers recovering from a night out, and I had stayed over at his parents' house. "That's not going to happen," he said, and his expression hardened slightly. "I never get up in the night anymore." We played one final game of chess before calling it a day and making our way upstairs to the one fully restored bedroom. The smell of fresh paint lingered slightly, but was not overly unpleasant on the nostrils, and his choice of soft pastels produced a pleasing effect. I noted with fondness the display of Star Wars figures on the bookcase and the lightsaber displayed on the wall directly above the bunk. "May the Force be with you," I said as we turned in. "Good night." I was awakened by a curious slithering noise, like that of a soaking wet mop on the surface of a parquet floor. I tilted my head from side to side in the darkness in an effort to pinpoint its origin. It seemed to be coming from under the bed. "Do you hear it too?" Bob's tremulous voice was barely audible above the slithering. "Yes. What is it?" I whispered back. "I don't know." His voice rose slightly. "I've never had the courage to look." "Is it an animal of some kind?" I persisted. "A rat or something?" It sounded too large to be a rat. "I told you. I don't know." I inched myself toward the edge of the bed and leaned over. The noise was louder now. A slithery, whisking noise, but there was something else, too. A soft, sucking sound which continued into a rasping chewing, culminating in a low, gurgling sound. Whatever was making it seemed to be moving from side to side in gentle, sweeping movements. What the hell was it? "Do you have a torch?" I whispered. "No." "Matches or a lighter?" "No." I needed to see what was under the bed, but how? Attempting to cross the floor space to the light switch by the door was out of the question. What if it was some sort of giant rat or something worse? What if it launched an attack on my bare legs? What if it was rabid? The noise stopped. Had it gone, or was it aware of my presence and inching silently toward me? its vicious teeth bared in a ferocious snarl, poising itself to strike at my throat. Instinctively, I drew back. What the hell was it? I needed to find a light source. Does the lightsaber still work? The question sounded ludicrous once I asked, and I felt a giggle rising in my throat. I stifled it with an effort. Bob, does the lightsaber still work? Has it got batteries in it? I heard the creaking of the metal supports, pictured Bob reaching upwards in the darkness, heard a dull metallic click, and then a soft glow illuminated his pale features. Yes, it works, he hissed. He stretched forward, pressing the handle into my waiting palm. I grasped it tightly and held it out in front of me as I stooped forward to peer under the bed. The diffused light cast a faint glow in the enclosed space, and something backed away from it in an uneven rolling motion. I swung the lightsaber slowly in a sideways curving arc, back and forth, up and down, until I caught a momentary glimpse of a tangled mass of clumpy white hair, thinning in places to expose patches of pale, flaking scalp, and framing a staring, bloodshot eye. A gaping, broken-toothed mouth rolled into view. There was a sickening crunch, and a searing pain surged through my wrist, causing me to drop the lightsaber as I flung myself upwards to safety. "What is it? What did you see?" gasped Bob, fear carving his words into my brain. "There's a head under your bed," I said. "And it's hungry." I swung myself onto the ladder and climbed upwards, oblivious to the throbbing injury to my right wrist. Only when I reached the comparative safety of the top bunk did I pause to check the damage in the pale moonlight that dimly filtered into the uppermost regions of the room. Bob was galvanized into action as he took in the steady flow of blood oozing downwards, forming rivulets along my fingers and dripping onto the quilt. Wrenching the pillow from its case, he folded the soft material into a thick, narrow band and tied it tightly around my wrist to staunch the bleeding. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, in a voice much stronger now he had taken action. "If we don't, you could bleed to death. I think you've severed an artery." "But how are we going to accomplish that?" I grunted. "The bloody thing's still down there, and I don't fancy our chances of making it to the door in one piece. If it can do this to my wrist, think what it could do to a leg." "Leave that to me," he said in a matter-of-fact voice. "Get ready to move and follow my lead." They say that danger brings out the best in people, and Bob was no exception. With a roar, he launched himself over the side and plunged to the floor and thrust his arm under the bed. There was a whooshing of the lightsaber plastic as he swung it viciously and jabbed at the gaping mouth, now rolling into view. "Run!" he yelled. "I'll be right behind you." I hurled myself forward, landing heavily on the uncarpeted floor before crashing shoulder first into the wall and striking the doorframe with my forehead. My blood-soaked fingers scrabbled for the light switch, but slipped uselessly off without effect. Straightening myself, I tried again, using my left hand. The single bare bulb burst into life, illuminating the room and revealing an horrific scene that will haunt me for the rest of my days. The head had Bob by the throat and was dragging him inexorably under the bed, its one bloodshot eye glaring victoriously at me as it withdrew into the darkness. I grabbed Bob's legs in a desperate attempt to halt the inevitable, but the fight was a useless one, for whatever evil presence was under the bed that night was too powerful for mortal man.